Let's go back to late 70s. And no, let's go back to the mid 70s, okay? I was, in 1975, I was still involved with Rising Up Angry, and I had also been teaching at Columbia College. And Rising Up Angry basically came to an end. And we owned a building on Belmont, 1215 West Belmont. And we had a bookstore in there, we'd have mass meetings in there, we had our legal committee meeting in there. But the war in Vietnam was over, things were sort of mellowing out, people went in other directions. I tried to keep the organization going by turning it into the Rising of Us All. I thought that would be a more appropriate name. I was starting to get into doing a lot of running. I hadn't done much working out since playing football in college, but I got intensely into running and lifting weights again, and there was a lot of New Age influences. I took the EST course with Werner Erhard in Boston, and just so everyone knows that I didn't capitulate to the whole deal, I remember asking the trainer, I said, "You mean that the Vietnamese are responsible for the bombs that are dropping on them?" And they didn't want to talk about that. But I became very popular with a number of the people who were taking the class at that time, or the workshop, or the training. I put together at Columbia, well, I was teaching at Columbia College, and I was teaching a class called Organizing for Social Change. And in that class, I would try to familiarize the students with the civil rights movement, the women's movement, labor movement, what was going on in the Chicano community, the farm workers, Vietnam, all of the stuff. You know, each week we'd take another topic and get into it. But I developed what I called the mini red economy, and it was basically what I put out there was we need to develop an interconnecting network of small businesses. Want to kill that sound? Okay, the jukebox comes on every 20 minutes automatically here at the Heartland if no one's putting money in it. It's like to encourage them to spend some money and in the jukebox. At Columbia College, though, I came up with this concept of the mini red economy, and my idea was that we would have, I had been reading about Mao Zedong, writing about the base areas in China. I had read about the independence movement in Kenya with co-ops and stores and credit unions and things, and there had been some talk about how those efforts had helped in the independence and liberation struggle from England. And I said, I like this idea, and I talked about, in my classes at Columbia, I talked about an interconnecting network of small businesses that would provide a great service in the community, would give people a good place to work and a good job, and it would give them free time for their political work. And some of the things that I talked about were a daycare center, a recording studio, a record store. That's when we still had records. And an automobile repair co-op, a bakery, photo studios, a restaurant, bar, art gallery, bakery, those kind of things. And lo and behold, a woman who went on to open her own place called Mama Peaches, which was a gay women's place. Before she did that, she said, "I'll offer you," and I have a partner in all my enterprises whose name is Katie Hogan, and she says, "I'll offer you and Katie some money to start the restaurant." And the restaurant was either going to be called Sweet Home Chicago or the Heartland Cafe. So it became Sweet Home Chicago's Heartland Cafe. And we didn't ever get the money from her, but we decided we were going to go ahead and open a place. And I had tried to get a place on Belmont Avenue, which would have probably been much more lucrative looking back on it, but it probably wouldn't have given us the same freedom to still be politically conscious. We probably would have had to become real serious business people down there. But I was sitting in Chester's Hamburger King over on the corner of Sheffield, Newport, and Clark, which is a little Japanese greasy spoon. And it's just down from from Wrigley Field, and you would see all kind of people would go into Chester's. I loved Chester's. You would have coaches from the Cubs would go in there, firemen, police officers, drug dealers, various workers, artists. You'd have dancers. You'd have all kind of people would go in there for rice and gravy or breakfast and yakamain and different things that they'd serve, corned beef hash, liver, and I was in the back with a guy named Jack Bornoff. Now, Jack has since moved to California. He's involved in some theater. I think he's involved in some animation stuff. But he was the guy who said to me when I said, they won't rent me this place on Belmont. They want me to pay the fire insurance and blah, blah, blah. He says, I know a great place. It's called Lackey's Steakhouse. And it's up at the corner of Glenwood and Lunt, which now we call the heart of Rogers Park. And my partner Katie, who had gone to Mundelein before it was usurped, taken over, encompassed by Loyola, she said, oh yeah, I used to hang around there all the time. And we came up here in the spring, and lo and behold, there was a big patio, there was a big open sidewalk here on the corner. And in the old days there used to be a grocery store, a butcher store, a fish market, it was all kind of little stuff here on the corner. By the time we got here, there was Lackey's Steakhouse, had 2 of these storefronts, and then there was the Independent Voters of Illinois, was in the 3rd one over, and there was a TV repair shop in the 4th one. And as I recall it, it was a cloudy day and it had been raining, and all of a sudden the sun came out and there was a rainbow. And it was like another, gift from God, special message. And I thought, oh, this will be a great place. We'll be able to have people eating outside. All the trains stop here. It's an A-B stop at the Morse Avenue stop, which we call the Morse Lunt L stop. And we got real enthused about doing this. And Katie and I took a ride in my 57 Firebird. And we went down to New Orleans for the Mardi Gras in February of '76. And lo and behold, we were of altered consciousness. I must confess, because that's part of the culture, part of the history. We had altered our consciousness, and we were on a southern oak tree in Audubon Park in New Orleans, and during Mardi Gras in the daytime, in the rain, and we were up on this big southern oak tree. And that's when we shook hands and said, we will do this for 2 years. That was 24 years ago, or 25 almost. So we came back, and on May 1st, 1976, instead of going to whatever demonstration there was downtown to celebrate May Day, which was initiated here in Chicago, and of course during the 50s, under Eisenhower, it became Law Day. It's only now starting to come back as a big labor holiday in this country. It is throughout the rest of the world. But on May 1st, '76, my son Jesse, my son David, my former wife Stormy, my partner Katie, my former mother-in-law who still works at the Heartland, Jean, and probably a couple other people, we started tearing this place apart. And we worked on it. May, June, July, 3 months. We're working away. People would come by in the neighborhood. When are you going to open? We were macrameing chairs. We were taking up the tile off the floor. We get shipment of dry ice to pop these things off. We had little tiny, we didn't have a lot of tools. We had a little 1/4-inch drill with a little wire brush, and we were doing the walls, down to the bare brick, which are since covered up, so we can have these nice white walls for art and photo exhibits. And they'd say, when are you going to open? And we'd say, oh, soon we're going to open. Now, we had marshaled $4,000 from family and friends, and we were also living on that. And it got to be where we didn't have any money left. We had $200 left. We said, we're going to go buy the food. So we went down to Southwater Market, and we bought $200 worth of food from the Greater Illinois People's Co-op, which was down on Southwater Market at that time, before it got racked apart by sectarian infighting between the Marxist and the purist food people, etc. And we bought the food, and we opened on August 11th, and it was a Wednesday. And I remember kept coming out and announcing to the people. There were 43 people who ate here that night, and I would say, "We'll be ready in a few minutes. We're almost ready." And we had a big piece of paper with all of the specials written on it, all the food we were going to have. And back in the kitchen was my roommate from Uptown days. He probably was still my roommate, Art Sagamaki, whose nickname, and it's a racist nickname, but he liked it, called Chink. And he actually works for Alderman O'Connor. Not the most progressive alderman, but he is our neighbor to the south. And so Art was working in the kitchen. His mom had worked at a Japanese restaurant here in town, and he knew how to cook. This guy could really cook, and we put out the plate. And my first memory of waiting on a table was trying to hide my dirty fingernails. They're pretty clean now, but they were real dirty. We've been working hard on this place, and I was standing there trying to address a well-heeled guy and his daughter, and this fellow, he had a sport jacket on, and he probably was a macrobiotic, you know, a real food purist guy. And I was trying to hide my fingers, but it went okay that night. And we've been open ever since, except for a couple of holidays. We close on Christmas, and we close on Thanksgiving, and we close on the 4th of July if it's not on a weekend. And sometimes we open at night on the 4th of July. We really became a hit quite quickly, I think. A lot of people started coming to the Heartland. It was the only game in town, you know. It was like there were people who were a little irked at me being a radical, lefty kind of guy who was now a business guy. I only now, 24 years later, am I really trying to think like a business guy who has progressive politics but puts the business stuff in proper perspective. Because while we served the community and we did lots of food for various organizations, we did food for, and we still do food for different schools like Waldorf School. We did other ones. We did child care centers. We never took in a lot of money, and we were actually paying ourselves in the early days $5 a shift per person, and we split the tips up. And actually there's a photo in the back of the first crew, which you may want to grab and put on here. But we didn't pay the IRS. We didn't, you know, the last people we were going to pay was the effing government, you know, and it was a big mistake because it burdened us for a long time. You know, even when you'd start making payments, and I warn all the young people who are going into business to pay your taxes. And if you'll notice that the Nation of Islam or the black Muslims, they always said, pay your bills on time, you know. And my line today is, don't get hooked into bullshit bureaucratic hassles, you know. Save your struggles for major struggles. We paid, at one time we paid $40,000, that none of it went to the principal, it all went to the interest. We didn't know about that. But the Heartland continued to grow. Katie was working at the Urban Studies program, which is kind of in demise now, but it was at the time it had been a really neat program where kids from around the Midwest would come from these small colleges and they would work jobs, intern jobs for various organizations and outfits in town. And we always had an ongoing stream of students coming in here and wanting to work here. A number of people have worked here and gone on into politics, into culture, into writing, gone off to graduate school. It was the kind of place where you could leave and come back to. There was, at that time, early on, we got behind a guy named David Orr, who had been a teacher at Mundelein and Katie's teacher, and we elected him the alderman. He went on to become the mayor when Harold died for a few days, and I think if he hadn't been so concerned with having the support of the black community without there being any divisions, he would be the mayor today. But he deferred to others, and we got Eugene Sawyer, with the help of Mel, jumping up and down on his desk. You know, the Chicago alderman pool continues, you know, back then and today, continues to be some pretty self-serving, avaricious kind of guys, mostly guys. There have always been some good people who stood up, but there have always been people who were basically greasing their own palms and lining their pockets. I think that remains a challenge today, and hopefully if people are looking at this 100 years from now and flying around in cool little spaceships, you know, kind of like your individual iMac but on a bigger level, you know, you would be able to, I hope things have progressed and that you no longer have just greedy politicians. And I'm saying this a few days after George Bush Jr., whatever his name is, the shrub we call him, has been named the president. And if you want to talk about a stolen election and some really low-level stuff, this was one. It even has driven me to root for Al Gore more than I want to. Okay, the Heartland Cafe today is now 24 years old, pushing 25. We will be 25 on August 11th. We plan some big celebrations. Over the years, we developed entertainment here. Some notable bands, 11th Dream Day and Smashing Pumpkins and numbers of others have played here. Not to mention people who have eaten here. There's plenty of movie stars and political activists and bands and the Grateful Dead and different Yes and these different groups have eaten here. Today we are we've branched out a little bit. We after a number of years we had started a bar. It's called the Buffalo Bar, Heartland Cafe's Red Star Warm Heart Buffalo Bar. We have a general store. We have a theater up at the end of the block in the building. We bought the building probably in '89. And in the building there was also a bar called Roy's Bar. And Roy's Bar, it had different names. 7006 Club in the early 40s was the earliest I've heard people talk about it, but it obviously goes back a lot longer. Roy died a few years back and we took over his bar. It's now called the Red Line Tap. Red Line can be a lot of things. It happens to be next to the Red Line tracks. That's of the elevated, the L. It also is, you know, it's a political term, the Red Line. And so that's a neighborhood bar, Rogers Park's friendly neighborhood tavern. Down the street is a place called the No Exit Cafe. Now the No Exit Cafe started in Evanston in 1958 and it moved to a couple of places. It was across the street over here. It's on the other corner of Glenwood and Lunt. And about 15, 16, 18 years ago it moved down the block to 6770 North Glenwood. And Brian and Sue Cozen, who were the last people to own it, closed it up. We're planning to sell it. Couldn't find a buyer. In this time of gentrification where a lot of poorer people have been driven off of Howard Street and a lot of stuff has moved down here to Morse Avenue, just to our south. So I found that after they closed, we started having a lot more street traffic and drugs and drinking on the street, and Katie and I decided we would buy the No Exit. And so now we have, it's the Heartland Cafe, the Red Line Tap, the Buffalo Bar, I guess somebody wants this guy wants his $5. I bet that Gore would beat Bush. Yeah, everybody wants money. So we've got all these places now here in the neighborhood, plus we have a concession stand at the lake. And that's called Heartland on the Lake. And hopefully we'll be able to renew it and have it for another few years. Because even though there's a real gentrification tendency in the Park District, thank you very much. I hope someone else will pay your bill for you. That's the only money I lost. I didn't lose any money on football, any money on baseball. I did lose $5 on the presidential election. Anyhow, the Park District right now is pushing for making a bunch of money off places along the lake. And if those people remember this year 2000, there was a really upscale place down there at Oak Street Beach. And actually I went by the other day and it's all folded up and hauled away for the winter. But I know they think they're going to be able to do that all along the lake. What they don't get yet is in this neighborhood there's still a lot of poor people. If you go to the wonderful Loyola Park over here in our neighborhood, it's just filled with kids who come from low-income backgrounds and in a great basketball and baseball programs and other activities. So being a businessman over at the lake is, we can certainly see the potential for a more upscale trend in the neighborhood, but in reality you get handfuls of kids coming by with whole bunches of kids with handfuls of pennies and stuff saying, what can I get for this? I sincerely hope that the Heartland is around for a number of more years. My plan, I have a lot of kids. I have actually 5 blood kids and 3 step kids, ranging in age from 6 to 38 maybe. Some of them, 3 of them were Stormy's kids. One is my daughter Koya with a woman named Leslie who lives on the East Coast, and then my current and lovely wife Paige James. We have 3 kids. There's Katie and Lake, Jack Henry James who's 6, Hal Coltrane James who is 9, and Casey Blue James who's 11. So I've got 3 of them at home. Hopefully some of the kids will want to get involved in this thing. I don't know. They've all got careers. My son Jesse is now kind of a hotshot high-end gift salesman in New York who says, "Oh, Dad, yeah, I'm still political, and I'll do something sooner or later." My daughter Koya is an actress in town and a rape crisis counselor with the YWCA, and actually did a performance last night at Victory Gardens with her new Latina-based theatrical company, which I didn't go to because it was snowing again. But all the little kids say they want to be involved with the Heartland. I don't know how it's going to come down, but I don't see it going anywhere. I mean, we're out of debt with the IRS. We're trying to clean up our stuff with the Illinois Department of Revenue from the old days, and I don't think I'll be able to get out of here. I'm definitely the kind of guy like the Sioux Indian guy who puts his spear in the ground, and this is it. I'm going to stick here. This is my turf.